Often the strongest-willed souls are also the youngest. Frail but tenacious, they astound us with their resilience. For a premature infant, surviving preterm birth isn't always the end of their fight. Sometimes it's just the beginning.
Essentially, 1 in every 100 children that enters a NICU will go blind.
The culprit, a disease called retinopathy of prematurity, or ROP. Dr. Thomas Lee of the Vision Center at Children's Hospital Los Angeles has to be constantly vigilant to protect his young patients.
If we are not on our 100% A game all the time, a child can go blind in a span of 5 or 6 days. The buck stops there.
As director of the Center for Fetal and Neonatal Medicine at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, Dr. Istvan Seri has seen remarkable improvements in the survival rates of premature infants during his career.
So in the 1960s, approximately 50% of the premature babies born around 30 to 31 weeks would survive. Now we are at the point where babies have a 50% chance to survive if they are around 24 to 25 weeks. Survival is one issue, but quality of life is another. By getting better at making these babies survive, we also have started facing new problems. One of these problems is retinopathy of prematurity, or ROP.
Retinopathy of prematurity is a condition that happens in the retina of children born early, generally at 29 weeks or less.
In babies born that prematurely, the blood vessels in the eye aren't fully developed. As these babies grow outside the womb, these blood vessels sometimes become disorganized and tangled, leading to the formation of scar tissue. In the most severe form of ROP, this scar tissue can literally tear the other delicate structures of the eye apart and destroy a newborn's vision.
The retina is the most complicated part of the eye. It's like film you'd have in a camera. Because of how delicate that structure is, if you were to tug on it even a little bit, it would cause at the very least distortion. And if the tugging was hard enough and it resulted in a detachment, you could actually have blindness.
Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines and when doctors go wrong, retinopathy of prematurity, to examine how James Gerards, founder of the Gerards Law Firm, got justice for Daniela Bustamante and her family in a very challenging medical malpractice case. Daniela was born prematurely at 23 weeks in El Paso, Texas. Because of her early birth, she had 100% certainty of developing ROP. She was stabilized by the NICU staff at her birth. But weeks later, when it was time to start examining her eyes to detect developing ROP, the exams didn't take place when they were supposed to. A late eye exam found her eyes to be at an urgent stage requiring immediate treatment, but the laser was nowhere to be found. Due to more missteps by the eye doctor, Dr. Jorge Llamas Soforo of El Paso, Texas, and the Pediatrics Medical Group, the company that operated the NICU, Daniela did not receive treatment until 3 more days had passed. When she was finally treated, the laser treatment was not done properly. In a court of law, a jury of Dr. Llamas Soforo's peers not only concluded that he didn't follow standard operating procedures for ROP eye exams, but that he had also had no formal training to treat retinopathy of prematurity with a laser, and he was not even a pediatric eye specialist at all. It was also discovered that he had many other babies that went blind in El Paso under his care, which the jury never got to hear about. So, Daniela has very little functional eyesight. Daniela's parents were never told any of this. How many infants have ROP? There are approximately 3.9 million infants born in the U.S. every year. About 14,000 are affected by ROP, and 90% of those affected have only mild disease. About 1,100 to 1,500 develop disease severe enough to require medical treatment, and 400 to 600 infants each year in the U.S. become legally blind from ROP. In this insider-exclusive investigative TV special, we examine how Jim Gerard at the Gerard's Law Firm has been for years representing injured victims of medical malpractice cases caused by incompetent and negligent doctors. Jim has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Dallas, in Texas, and across America. His goals not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure that everyone is treated with equal respect and dignity as guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. His passion is problem solving. He approaches each medical negligence case as a scientist and a lawyer trying to solve a puzzle. And because he's seen many patients suffer needless pain and injury, he makes it his dedicated mission to get legitimate, truthful answers to tough questions and issues, which result in hospitals and doctors being more responsible to patients and society. These successes drive him to help more people who have been harmed by incompetent and negligent doctors. His goal, to make medicine safer and more accountable. Jim has built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. His amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Dallas, Texas. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jim Gerard to the show. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Morning.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What kind of law does your firm practice mainly?
Well, we always represent people who've suffered needless injury or death, especially related to medical malpractice, trucking collisions, birth injuries, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I noticed when I was reviewing the information on you yourself, you are what's called a board-certified lawyer in a particular practice. What is that?
That's right. In Texas, board certification is achieved by having a certain amount of specialized experience and then passing some rigorous testing. And once you've accomplished that and had a certain minimum number of trials to jury verdict, then you can become board certified. And I was able to achieve that some years ago.
The reason we're here today is we're talking about one particular case, the Bustamantes and their daughter Daniela, correct?
That's correct.
Tell our audience a little bit about who your clients are and their daughter.
You know, the Bustamantes are a really wonderful family, and Jose and Marcela lived in El Paso, and they had a little daughter named Daniela, and she was born very prematurely. Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, she suffered some needless injury during that neonatal period that left her blind.
Right, and in the medical terminology, that's called retinopathy of prematurity, correct?
Retinopathy of prematurity.
Yes, and explain to our audience what that is.
Well, when a child is born very prematurely...
Under 31 weeks, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. The blood vessels in the eyes are not fully developed. That usually happens during the final weeks of a pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And so outside of the womb, the blood oxygenation fluctuations can result in the blood vessels growing abnormally.
Right.
And if that condition is not diagnosed timely and treated correctly, then the baby can be blind forever. But this is a mostly preventable injury.
In other words, premature babies, this should be looked at immediately and treated on a regular basis, correct? To prevent it.
Well, in order to prevent it, there is a window ranging from approximately 30 to 33 weeks of the gestational period where the baby is particularly susceptible to this. And that's the period of time where routine eye exams need to take place, and they need to be repeated every week or two until the blood vessels have completed their growth.
Yeah. Now, the reason we're here today is Daniela was not treated properly by her doctor, correct?
That's correct.
And as a result of that, what happened?
Well, as a result of her not being screened on time and with the frequency that's required by the standards, she developed this disease, and it was not picked up early enough. And then when the doctors recognized she needed treatment, the laser that's used to treat the disease was not available. And so that added on to the delays, ultimately resulting in permanent blindness.
And this is obviously, since it was preventable, negligence and incompetence, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, I understand at that same clinic, is it pediatrics? Is that it?
Well, the hospitals nowadays frequently will sign a contract with a company like Pediatrics to take over the operation of their neonatal intensive care unit.
Yes.
The hospital basically turns it over to this company for the operations. And that's what this hospital had done. But the hospital, neither the hospital nor Pediatrics had the policies and procedures in place to make sure that every baby got screened on time every time.
Yeah. Now, this young lady, she's 8 years old now, right, Daniela?
Yes.
With emerging technologies, maybe sometime in the future, her vision might be able to improve, correct?
I believe so. And vision restoration technology is at a critical point right now.
Right.
And at the time of the Bustamante trial, retinal implant technology was used for the first time on a human being in Italy. And these are, the easiest way to think about it would be a microchip implanted into the eye that puts visual data directly into the optic nerve. It's really fascinating technology, and it's growing so fast that we feel very strongly that in 10, 20 years, there will be some options for Daniela that will give her at least enough vision to where she can function without having someone lead her around day and night.
So this new technology that's emerging in Italy, and is it worldwide right now?
Well, it is worldwide.
Can people who were blind see now, or what?
Well, with the technology that's being used right now, it's being applied to people who are blind from a different disease process called macular degeneration.
Right, older people usually.
Right.
Yeah.
But as we've seen in technology, when an emerging technology comes out, then it's refined. There are second, third, fourth generation technologies, and it begins to spread to being applied to other types of diseases. And we feel very confident that in other blindness situations, when you have a functioning optic nerve, that this technology will be useful at some point. And then in addition to that, there are other technologies that are being used to put visual data directly into the brain, bypassing the optic nerve altogether, and that's exciting as well.
Is that almost could be termed robotic eyes?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where is that technology right now?
Well, the United States Patent Office issued the first U.S. patent for that technology a couple of years ago. And then there are centers at MIT, Stanford, and others that are working on vision restoration technology and just running with it. And one of the important centers is in Australia as well.
What were some of the challenges in this case when you took it on and pursuing it?
Well, one of the main challenges was we had a case against an important local hospital and against a publicly traded corporation, Pediatrics. And so they had unlimited resources to fight us on the case. And so it was one of those cases where you literally had to fight tooth and nail for every bit of data because they just weren't willing to give us anything voluntarily.
Yeah, then you have to go into court and demand it, correct?
Exactly.
And in these cases, then they give it up, right? And they give it up sometimes in a very slow process. They try and drag the thing out, correct?
Right. And then one of the other problems is when you're in a neonatal intensive care unit and you're a young parent, you're scared for the health of your child because these babies typically have a laundry list of severe health problems.
Right.
And so oftentimes the parents don't understand much, if anything, about the eyes in particular or what is supposed to happen with the eye exams. And so finding out the information in some cases can be very difficult because the parents just don't know.
What we liked a lot about this case, it established a new legal precedent. Tell our audience what that is.
Well, the important legal precedent of this case is the focus on the emerging technologies and setting aside money for the emerging technologies that don't actually exist today for human use, but they exist in the laboratory, and we know that they're going to be useful in the years ahead.
So the verdict was, I think, $2.4 million, correct?
Approximately.
and a portion of that was set aside for emerging technologies, correct?
Right. Typically, a jury is asked to award money for future medical expenses,
Yes.
for example, and that's pretty standard. In this particular case, we emphasized the emerging technologies and what we thought would need to be set aside at a minimum for that. And
Right.
so we felt very confident that the award, which was almost $1 million, included a lot of the information that we had provided for the emerging technologies.
Oftentimes, cases like this set not only a precedent, as you have just brought up, but also it sends a message to society. It sends a message to doctors, the healthcare industry. What is the message that it is sending them regarding premature babies?
Well, the message for premature babies is multiple fold, because in these very premature babies, what we have found is that the hospitals and the neonatal intensive care unit contractor companies have failed to put into place recognized screening protocols for these eyes, and they leave it up to, for example, the eye doctor alone. Well, that leaves this environment vulnerable to miscommunication, miscalendaring, failure to calendar. And so there are needless delays that can be built into that system if everybody isn't playing their role in making sure the baby's eyes get screened.
This same doctor that you sued had other cases where he failed to make the necessary tests, give the necessary tests, and as a result, other children suffered from retinopathy of prematurity too, right?
Well, that's correct. We found that this doctor was associated with somewhere between 9 and 11 blind babies. And so when we looked into...
Who should be seeing today, but they're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we found that this doctor had not been trained to evaluate these babies' eyes and had not had any formal training to actually use the laser that's used to treat these babies. And obviously, when you're shooting a laser into a newborn's eyes, you really need to know what you're doing and have the proper training. He just didn't have that.
What is the status of the case now?
The status of the case now is it is on appeal in the Dallas Court of Appeals in Texas.
And when do you expect to hear anything?
Well, we are filing our briefs now, and we're expecting an oral argument in the months ahead, and then a decision probably this fall or in the spring.
There are plenty of people who go to a doctor and think that a doctor has performed medical malpractice on them. When people come to you, when they contact you and say, I think my doctor screwed up, how do you evaluate a medical malpractice case?
Well, when we're contacted by someone who's suffered what they think is a needless injury or death due to mistakes in a hospital setting or a doctor's office, we will do a detailed interview, of course, and find out what happened and what they think happened. Oftentimes people come to us because somebody in the hospital said, you need to call a lawyer because this shouldn't have happened.
Usually an employee of the hospital, correct?
Frequently that's
Who's
the
speaking
case.
kind of off the record, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And so that people come to us sometimes because of that, because we have one of my lawyers, for example, is an interventional cardiologist as well as a lawyer, so we have a lot of specialized medical knowledge. But once once we have a family come into us, then we'll get the medical records and we'll review the medical records, figure out exactly what happened, why it happened, what medications were implicated, and all of those issues. And then we get a comprehensive picture of the healthcare process, and we can identify where breakdowns may have occurred.
You know, this is a question a lot of people usually have. You know, in medical science, there is no definite solution or answer. There's a lot of unknowns, right?
Right.
And oftentimes doctors will go to the family who's just going to have one of their members is going to have surgery and say, you know, there's a 50-50 chance that you will be okay, right? And let's say the operation doesn't turn out well. How do you define incompetence or negligence when they have expressly warned the family or the patient that it may not turn out well?
Well, mostly we look for the failure to use evidence-based protocols, for example.
Standard procedures.
Well, standard procedures and the like. And so, for example, if a doctor operates on the wrong part of the body or the drugs...
It's obvious.
Yeah, it's obvious. But but frequently there are things that are less obvious when there's where there's a medication error, or where medication is not timely given, or
when there's something that any layperson would have seen was wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes there'll be needless delays when a patient's condition deteriorates, and the doctor either won't or doesn't come in on time, or the nurses don't call the doctor on time, and something that could have easily been treated ends up causing severe injury or death just because of the passage of a needless amount of time.
Yeah, you've been practicing law for what, 20 years?
23 years.
23 years. You've had a lot of medical malpractice cases.
Right.
Have you ever run into a doctor who said, yeah, it's my fault, I did it?
You know what? On only one occasion in 23 years have I ever had a doctor say, you know what, I messed up and it's my fault and I want to fix this. Mm-hmm. Every single other case, the doctor has denied fault, even in the most obvious cases. Wrong site button surgery, failure to diagnose.
Even when it's clear-cut evidence showing that they were negligent.
Even when it's clear-cut evidence. And on that question, that's a real important question, because I think what happens in a lot of the cases is the doctors are under a contract with their insurance company, and frequently those contracts prevent the doctor from admitting fault, even when the doctor knows he's at fault. And so frequently there's a hidden hand in the courtroom, so to speak, where the doctor is prevented by contract from telling the truth. And that's a big problem in this litigation arena.
What amazes me in medical malpractice cases in a number of states throughout the country, including the state of Texas, is that there are caps that have been put in place for non-economic damages, otherwise interpreted as pain and suffering.
Right.
How would you want to see those laws change for folks who don't have any economic damages? In other words, they weren't working, they were unemployed, they're old or whatever, so that they would be able to be compensated for all the pain and suffering that a doctor who is negligent in administrating medical help. How would you want to see the laws change there?
Well, the laws that cap the damages at an arbitrary number are really unfair, and they're mostly unfair to the people who are most deserving.
Yes.
So, for example, if someone has a severe injury, a severe burn, for example, over 50-60% of the body, and has a finite amount of medical bills, those are the people that really get harmed by this, because they're the ones that really by all accounts deserve more money, and yet they're arbitrarily capped.
And this state is how much money?
$250,000.
Right.
And it's the people who have smaller injuries that are allowed full compensation for their damages that are the ones that are not affected by it. So it really has the opposite effect of what people think and what the politicians told us.
Do you see that changing sometime soon?
Well, I think as more and more focus is put on the issue in the public eye, the public is already starting to become aware of how unfair the system is.
Yes.
And especially as more and more people are turned away from the system, the courthouse door is locked for them. I think we're going to see some movement toward restoring some fairness to the system.
Right. Well, this is one reason why we do these stories, not only on the case, but also to educate the public, because they really need to know this. And I want to thank you very much for being on this show and sharing your case with us. Congratulations again.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at InsiderExclusive.com.